Hey there, it's Allison Meow here. I just wanted to read some more stories from Reddit Let's Not Meet. Here we go. A bit of context about where I live and who I am. I live in a decently wealthy community in central New Jersey. Very low crime rates, just the occasional petty theft. Not really any problems with kids acting out. There's always that one guy, but it was few and far between. In high school, I tended to keep to myself and focus on my academics. I was a textbook nerd. I took all honors and advanced classes, was part of the high school band, orchestra, jazz ensemble, and pit orchestra. I had a nice group of friends and never ventured out of that group. I admit back then I was extremely naive and a bit of a pushover. Freshman year started off pretty normal. My town has 2 middle schools that combine into one high school, so half of the kids I'd never met before. I quickly make my group of friends, most of them being in band. We occasionally have run-ins with some of the football players since our marching band plays at all the football games. Most of them are nice to us, and overall appreciate that we play at all the games. One day after a game, I decided to head inside of the school to grab a book from my locker. I had forgotten to bring it home earlier that weekend. All of the football players had made their way inside already to the boys' locker room. As I was passing by it, one of the freshman players happened to be sitting leaned up against the locker right outside the door. We made eye contact, and I politely smiled at him. Man, was I super friendly back then. He just stared at me blankly, not returning the smile. I shrugged this off, figuring he just felt like being a jerk. Whatever. I got my book and went home. Fast forward a few weeks. I start noticing the grumpy football player a lot more than I used to. As in, I never used to see him around before, but now I see him everywhere. I dismissed this as me only noticing him because he was stuck in my mind now as a huge unfriendly grump. I pointed out to a classmate I was friendly with, who was a member of the football team, that I keep seeing this kid all over the place, always awkwardly staring at me, not smiling. My classmate goes, "Oh, you mean Batman? Yeah, he's weird." I asked why he was called Batman, and my friend explained that whenever the football team changes in the locker room, Batman never changes in front of anyone. He always goes to the handicapped bathroom stall. A bunch of the guys noticed this and asked why he did that. The kid replied, "It's my bat cave." So the name Batman stuck. I don't remember exact timing here, but a while after that I was at home chatting with some friends on AIM. I know, this took place 10 years ago. Suddenly, a screen name that I didn't know popped up saying hello. I asked who the person was, and it turned out to be Batman. I had a friendly chat with him for a while, mostly me answering questions about how I enjoyed band, what instruments I played, if I was planning to major in music someday, etc. I thought nothing of the encounter and carried about my life as normal. Soon he started messaging me every single day on AIM. Even if my away message was up because I was trying to work on homework. He would just keep sending messages over and over until I responded. He eventually started asking more and more personal questions. What are you up to? Okay, seems pretty harmless. What are you doing this weekend? Also seemed pretty harmless, especially if he was trying to become friends with me. Questions about my family, such as, do you have any siblings? What are their names? Where do you live? Didn't tell him, just said I lived in town, obviously. Do you have a cell phone? We should talk on the phone instead. I lied and said I didn't. I always saved these conversations every time they happened. He eventually started asking about my relationship status, which was taken at the time. He would ask about my boyfriend, if I loved him or not, why I was with him. Then Batman would proceed to tell me that he would make a better boyfriend, rub my feet, snuggle me, buy me stuff, blah blah blah. I politely shut him down by saying something like, "No, sorry, I like my boyfriend, I'm not looking for someone else." I then made up an excuse about having to go get ready for meeting friends for dinner, and he automatically assumed that meant I was going to go have a shower, and he said, "Ooh, can I watch you in the shower?" I immediately freaked the F out and blocked him. The next day in school, he was waiting for me at my locker in the morning. I saw him from way down the hall, and noped the F out of there, not bothering to get my books. I went to first period with nothing, still carrying my backpack, which was against school rules. My teacher immediately pointed this out and gave me detention for being both unprepared and carrying my backpack around. I sat quietly the rest of the class, trying not to cry. After class was over, she pulled me aside and asked if everything was okay. I broke down, telling her everything that had happened. She instantly turned an awful shade of angry purple and marched me down to the principal's office, where she advocated for me and demanded that disciplinary action be taken and that Batman's parents be contacted. I felt so relieved and apologized profusely to her. For some reason, I felt guilty and like it was my fault he had acted that way toward me. She sternly put her hands on my shoulders and told me that it was never my fault for being harassed, and that if something like that happened again with anyone, to tell her. Unfortunately, she ended up retiring early after that year when her husband was diagnosed with cancer. I'm not sure what happened after reporting him, but the direct contact with me stopped. There's one incident shortly after where Batman approached one of my girlfriends and demanded her to give me a note from him. She told him no, and he angrily kicked her really hard in the shins. Luckily, a teacher saw him and he was suspended for a week. Fast forward to my junior year. I am now drum major of my marching band, taking a buttload of AP classes, and generally enjoying teenage life. I had completely forgotten about Batman and his crap by this point. One day after band practice, I hop on my after-school bus. One of my friends, George, happens to be on the same one. He sits in the two-seater. I sit across the aisle from him in the three-seater. Just before the bus driver's getting ready to leave, Batman gets on the bus. I instantly freak out, climb over my friend George, and squeeze myself between him and the window. George looks at me with a what the fuck face, and I gesture at Batman. Batman sits down in the three-seater that I had just jumped out of. The rest of the full-size school bus was completely empty, yet that is where he sat. George luckily lives the farthest away, so I'm confident I will be dropped off first, and George will be able to protect me the whole time. Then the bus driver turns around and says, "George, you're the farthest away, so I'll do you first." Great. We drop George off. He reluctantly exits the bus, giving me an "I'm so sorry" face the whole time. Batman takes his opportunity to start talking to me. He says that it's his birthday, and I awkwardly respond happy birthday to him. He continues rambling on about not having anybody to kiss on his birthday. I think I responded with something like, I'm sorry, that sucks." He then scooches to the edge of the seat that he is on, leans over, and places his hand on my knee. I'm wearing shorts at this point. It's near the end of the year. He starts stroking me in a circular motion with his thumb, and I do everything I can to plaster myself farther against the window. I pick my feet up and hug my knees to my chest. He moves his hand but continues leaning in close, rambling how maybe he could come over and we could hang out at my house for his birthday. I tell him I'm too busy with homework, and he continues to insist. I look out the window and notice we are driving on a route that is getting dangerously close to my house, and I start to freak out. I do not want him knowing where I live. I suddenly call up to the bus driver and pretend that I accidentally told her the wrong address because I had just moved recently. She gets a little annoyed, but agrees to drive me to my new house. I give her a fake address down the street from a close friend's house. We get to my house, and I'm quick to jump up and try to run out of the bus. Batman is quicker, jumps up, and blocks the aisle. He tells me that he won't leave until he gets his goodbye kiss. I tell him no. He insists again, and again I say no. He then says, "Okay, fine. How about a birthday hug, then?" I feel trapped, and like I have no other way out. I can't believe the damn bus driver isn't noticing any of this happen. I'm thinking she probably couldn't hear our conversation, and figured we were just flirting like normal teenagers do. I reluctantly agree to give him a birthday hug if it means he lets me get off the bus. I lean in to give him an awkward side hug, and he grabs my face and plasters his lips against mine. I struggle to escape, ripping his hands off my head. I jump over the seats and run out of the fucking bus and into a backyard, pretending to live there. As soon as the bus is out of sight, I walk all the way home crying. I didn't say anything about this for a week or so. I started receiving unsolicited IMs from him again. I had changed my privacy settings on AAM back to normal eventually after the first incident, to which I never applied to any of them. Most of them were poorly disguised sexual innuendos. I vividly remember one of his rants being about instruments having sex with each other, and his shitty and creepy-ass attempt at somehow playing towards my interests. Eventually the girl I was dating at the time noticed I had been acting really weird. She eventually squeezed the whole thing out of me and took me straight to the principal's office and complained on my behalf. She made me print out all of the IMs I had ever received from him, including the ones from freshman year. Batman was suspended for 2 weeks. After his suspension was over, one of the vice principals had the nerve to ask if I would agree to chat one-on-one with Batman because he wanted to apologize. She emphasized that it would be in a safe and controlled environment. I said no, that I never wanted to speak with Batman again. She spent the next week pestering me about giving him a second chance and letting him apologize. The last interaction I ever had with him was a nasty handwritten letter that he had shoved into my locker, calling me a bitch because I lied to the school, ruined his reputation, and got him in trouble with his parents. I poured ketchup on the note at lunch, rolled it up, shoved it into an empty water bottle, and threw it in the trash. Batman, I hope that we never, ever meet again. Okay, so a little backstory before I tell you one of the crazy experiences of mine that happened during my 2-year security career from 2013 to 2015. I am a 6'7" male in Australia. I'd like to think I'm a fairly tough and intimidating guy, but some of the shit that used to go on at the mall I used to work for at the night shift still gives me goosebumps to this day. So the mall I worked at was very, very large, probably the largest in my state I'd say, and all the way up to about 8:30 p.m. it would still be quite busy. Only around 9:30 would we manage to usher all the stragglers out, and only at about 11 o'clock p.m. would all the business owners have left. My job was basically to patrol the mall and make sure there was no one sticking around after the doors were closed during the night. We didn't have guns or batons, only a can of mace that was very rarely used. There were multiple occasions where we would find would-be thieves hiding around, trying to break into shops after dark, but they were normally outnumbered by the 4 or 5 of us on shift at a time, and would usually be intimidated by me or some of the other imposing members of security. This one night, though, shit started getting really weird for me on the night shift. So I'd say it was about 2 o'clock, and I was standing in the middle of the empty food court eating a sandwich. This was the only part of the mall that had any light at night time due to the skylight, so it was comfortable to eat there. While I was eating, though, I heard a dull scraping noise from the hallway leading off from the food courts into some toilets. It sounded like a piece of metal dragging across the floor. I was immediately put on edge, and I flicked on my flashlight, without a moment of hesitation. I can remember creeping down the hallway, flashlight in hand, illuminating a good 6 or 7 meters in front of me. As I got closer and closer to the end of the hall, the noise became louder and louder until I was at the end of the hallway, and there was the toilet doors to the left and right of me. I could tell the sound was coming from the female toilets, though. I gripped the handle and opened the door a tiny little crack. The noise was now very clear and had me not scared but confused. I yelled, "Oi, who's in there?" The noise quickly stopped. I paused a moment, listening hard to the tiny crack of the door, and I swear to fucking God I could hear breathing. Low, male breathing. I shut the door, still gripping the handle tightly, and flicked on my radio. "This is a 1-3. I need help in food court bathrooms. I think there's someone in here." No response. This was really strange, and it put me further on edge. Policy was to always answer the radio, and now I was truly becoming quite alarmed. "This is 1-3. Does anyone copy?" Still no response. I can remember whispering to myself, "What the actual fuck?" I again opened the door of a tiny crack. "Listen, mate," I said, sounding as intimidating as possible. "If you don't fucking come out with your hands up, you're gonna end up eating your teeth tonight. Do you want that?" I sat there at the door, quite honestly terrified at this point, but there was no response. In fact, there was now no noise at all. I yelled into the bathroom, "Okay, mate, I'm coming in. If you do anything stupid, it's not my fault. You'll never walk again." I tried my hardest to sound scary, but my voice was quivering at this point. This whole situation made no sense at all. Why would someone be in the female bathrooms? What was that metal noise? What the fuck is even happening? I very slowly opened the door and scanned my flashlight slowly across the room. All the cubicles were open. Weird. But other than that, the room was totally empty. I was totally shitting myself about now. I was definitely losing it. I walked into the center of the bathroom, closing the door behind me. Scared to the core, I let out a faint, "This is some horror movie shit, eh? Come out," when I heard the long, whining squeak of the door behind me. I span around, basically crying at this point, and shone my torch on a fucking massive man, at least a head taller than me, or so it seemed in my state at the time. He was Caucasian and in at least his 40s, with matte gray hair all over his forehead. He was mid-opening the door, but he stopped dead still in the middle of his action. He just looked at me, smiling this guilty fucking smile like a kid would make when he gets caught stealing biscuits or some shit like that. I'm not gonna lie, I was so scared I froze. He lifted his finger up to his mouth. "Shh," before swinging the door open all the way and sprinting out with what looked like some type of small metal box in his hand. Turns out he was just behind the toilet door when I was opening it, and I totally missed him. I was so fucking close to him, and I didn't even fucking notice him. He could have killed me if he had a knife or something, and that thought still haunts me to this day. Later that night, my radio miraculously started working again, and I got right on to telling my coworkers about my story. They collectively went pale when I told them what had happened. They all had similar stories, but none that were as much of a close call as mine. I worked the night shift for another week after that before I quit. I'm not sticking around a job like that. I needed help, and for some reason my radio fucked itself. Why? So weird old guy in the toilets, let's not meet again. Ever since I started running as a teenager, I've always gone running in whatever neighborhood I've lived in. I did my neighborhood running for 6 years without any issues. Then I moved into a somewhat run-down area when I was in my late 20s. I didn't really let it deter me and continued my neighborhood runs undaunted. For the most part, people either ignored me or were very kind to me. Then one day I was doing my normal run. I had my headphones in and was spacing out to the music. Earlier I had run past a group of people, but I didn't take much notice of them. Something now compelled me to stop my run and turn my head. Immediately, a hooded figure almost plowed into me. He had to have been jogging incredibly close to me for God knows how long. He took a step back with an incredibly surprised look, and I realized that he was just a boy, maybe 13 years old. I was annoyed but not threatened, so I brushed him off and continued my jog. Something didn't sit right with me. I kept looking back, and the boy in the hoodie was still following me. But what was weird is that he looked really, really uncomfortable, like he didn't want to do this. After our near run-in, he kept his distance, but continued to follow me throughout the neighborhood. Every turn I took, he took as well. I changed my route, and he followed. Finally, I sprinted towards a blind corner, took it, and scrambled into some nearby bushes. It felt absolutely ridiculous hiding from a child, but I wanted to confirm that he was indeed following me. Sure enough, I watched the boy in the hoodie walk down the street, clearly looking for me. Something about it just made my blood run cold. Sure, kids are stupid, and maybe he was playing a game, but he looked so frightened. I was certain this was not a game he was playing. I wondered if someone older had seen me jogging in the neighborhood and put him up to following me to see me where I had lived. I wasn't sure if that was paranoid thinking, or really what to think. As soon as the boy disappeared, I climbed out of the bushes with zero dignity and hauled ass home. I called my now ex-husband and told him what happened. He assured me that I wasn't being paranoid, that it was incredibly odd that the kid was following me around my running route, and it was especially odd that he seemed frightened rather than puckish. I changed my running route for a while after that, but it didn't take long for me to feel absolutely silly for being terrified of a child. I went back to my normal jogs around the neighborhood. About 3 months later, I encountered the boy again. It was about 11 o'clock at night, and same as before, I suddenly felt uncomfortable, and I turned around to see the boy following me. At a distance this time. He wasn't wearing a hoodie, just a white t-shirt, and this time I was more furious than afraid. I stopped in the middle of my run and took out my headphones. He stopped too. I asked him why he was following me. He didn't say a word. He just stared at the front of his shirt. I called my husband and asked him to come get me, because I sure as hell was not going to let this boy find out where I lived. So I waited at the corner of the street, and I watched the boy hide behind a truck tire. When my husband arrived, I told him that the boy was hiding behind the truck tire. Instead of taking me home, my husband pulled up behind the truck and threw on his high beams to illuminate the boy, who was leaning against the tire and hugging his knees. My husband got out of the car and asked the boy why he was following me. The explanation that came out of the boy was incoherent babble that my husband could not make any sense of. To be honest, the kid was probably just frightened of the very angry man who was looming over him. But he insisted that he wasn't following me. He said something about waiting for a friend with a bicycle and other incoherent things. After the boy finished, my husband shrugged and said, "Fine, whatever, but I don't ever want to find out that you were following my wife again. You got it?" The boy nodded, and my husband got in the car and drove me home. One thing that still doesn't sit well with me is how frightened that boy looked the 2 times I saw him. I honestly don't think he wanted to follow me, and I will never find out why he went out of his way to follow me, or what it was that scared him so much. I don't go running in my neighborhood anymore. My teenage years and childhood are kind of a blur, but I vividly remembered this event after reading a story similar to it about a year ago, and I posted it on the internet, but then deleted it. I figured now that I'm better at English, I would share it again. In the following story, I talk about suicide, so if this is a subject you're sensitive about, you might not want to hear it. Back in 2009-2010, when I was around 15, I was in a really bad stage of depression. I was constantly hurting myself in various ways, and I started pining for death soon after, but I never actually had the courage to act on it. I just planned it. After several months of complete misery, though, and after long nights of reflection on it, I finally decided to end my life. I had chosen a Thursday, because my mom had a busy schedule that day, and I knew if I bailed out, she wouldn't notice it, so the final morning came. I waited for my mom to go to work, then finished preparing my suicide letters, one for my mom, one for my dad. I left them on the table to make sure that they would be easily seen. I had decided to do it by jumping off a bridge in a nearby town, because I didn't want my mom or someone I knew to have to find my cold dead body. So at around 6 p.m., I headed for the train station, arrived in the town, and walked towards the bridge. I knew there was very little traffic on said bridge, but I waited for dark just to make sure. Once I was positive no one else was coming, I climbed on the edge and just sat there, trying not to bawl my eyes out. I wanted nothing more than to die, but I was seriously starting to doubt my ability to actually do it. I had always been a coward after all. Suddenly, I heard the sound of crunching, as someone was walking on the dead leaves that littered the sidewalk, and I quickly noticed it was coming closer. I didn't turn my head, but shortly after, a man leaned on the rail right next to me. As I glanced at him, I noticed that he was probably in his 30s or 40s. He started talking to me, asking my name, my age. Great, now he's going to try and stop me, I thought, but it quickly became weird. His questions became much more personal. Do you have a boyfriend? Why would you want to die? You're so pretty. It'd be such a waste. And other bullshit about how he could make me happy if I gave him a chance. I also had to constantly slide further away from him and push his hands away, as he kept trying to stroke my hair or hold my waist. And yet, no matter how many times I tried to make him leave me, he just kept coming back. He just wouldn't get the message. So I went fuck it and told him I'd change my mind, that I wouldn't jump, and I had to call my parents to go home. I just wanted to be as far away from him as possible. The moment I mentioned my parents, his face just fell, and I got genuinely scared. He suddenly grabbed my upper arm and started yelling at me, saying how I couldn't do that he wouldn't let me. I was freaking the fuck out. My face was covered in tears and sweat and snot. I was yelling just as much as him, and desperately trying to get him to just let go of me. When he finally let go of my arm for a brief moment, I immediately jerked it away and jumped from the rail to get away. Except that, in my state, I had completely forgotten that the ground is only on one side of the rail. On the other side is just emptiness, so I fell. I guess in the end I did end up doing what I had planned to do. I woke up in the hospital feeling like absolute shit. I won't go on about what happened afterwards, because these are not good memories, but I did tell the police about the incident and never had any news afterwards. I am now much better and properly medicated for my illness. I went to the bridge one last time about 2 months ago and noticed it was way too low for my fall to be deadly. In a way, I am thankful for jumping off the bridge, because who knows what would have happened if he had caught me. I just hope this fucking predator never was successful in his search. You really have to be the lowest piece of trash on the earth to go after such vulnerable people. Just a bit of backstory. I'm a 23-year-old woman. I have bad sleeping problems and live in a pretty shitty part of town where I live by myself in a small one-bedroom flat. For the last few months there's been whisperings and talk of people seeing a shabby-looking man sneaking around near some houses about 6 roads up from myself. I haven't really thought anything of it, as my next-door neighbor is a more nighttime person, and the old lady above me has 2 dogs who so much as bark at a cat in the gardens. That was until a few weeks ago. As I said before, I have sleeping issues. Not exactly insomnia, but my body clock's a little fucked. I can't get to sleep till early hours in the morning. Anyway, a few weeks back I was laying in bed reading an ebook on my tablet. I didn't have any lights on apart from the fairy lights entwined between the bars on my headboard. It was a pretty hot night, so I had the little window open that was next to my bed. It's a weird layout. I have one medium sort of sized window that takes up the whole left side. The bottom right is just plain glass, and the top right is a tiny window that opens all the way out, but it's about the size of a standard book. So I'm laying there reading when I start hearing a vibrating noise from outside, like from someone's phone. I pulled back the curtain and looked out. Nothing. It was pitch black outside. I ignored it and went back to my book. At around 4 a.m. I was starting to get sleepy, so I pulled up the window and started getting comfy, ready for sleep. That's when I hear it again. That vibration sound, but as soon as it starts, it stops. I assumed I was hearing things, that my mind was making something out of nothing, but then I heard something that sent my blood cold. You know when you scrape a fork or a knife on a plate, it makes that horrible sound? It was like that, but coming from my window. I didn't want to look. I didn't want to know. I'm just being paranoid. I wish I was just being paranoid for no reason. I heard another sound like a handle rattling. I snapped awake, slid out of bed, and crept to the foot of it. The rattling noise is getting worse, more angry and forceful. Grabbing a set of handcuffs, I leave there. Lucky for me, I'm kinda kinky and have a set of handcuffs on a long chain. One end is attached to the metal bars. I made sure they were ready. I reached for the curtains and practically pulled them off. All I saw was an arm and a hand that was reaching through my little window, trying to open the bigger one. I didn't hesitate. I slapped the cuff over his wrist before he pulled it out the window. That sure got his attention. So, little kitten likes to play rough, huh? Well, Daddy likes. He leans in close to the glass, so close his breath is fogging it. He starts thrashing, trying to get in. I bang on the wall between my room and the neighbor's, hoping he hears, and go to grab my phone off the window, still where I always leave it. But in my panic, I knocked it off, and something grabs my hair and pulls hard. Now this creep has me by the hair as he tries to reach through with his other hand, and that's when I see it. He's holding a knife. I scream as he pulls my hair, ripping it out, the tears running down my cheeks. I grab his other arm, trying to push it away. Kitten, open the window. When I don't answer, he brings the knife closer. Do it now, or I'll have to cut up that pretty face. The dogs upstairs are going mad, and I scream again, trying to pull away. He pulls his other arm out and smashes my head against the window. That's when it happened. My neighbor barrels through the garden and almost tackles him to the floor, almost being that he's still cuffed through my window. I run out through the kitchen to the back door, screaming for him to stop. Eventually he does. Turns out the old lady upstairs called the police and my neighbor after that. When she told him what she heard, he came rushing home, the one night he was out partying. The police came and did their business and called paramedics for me and the creep. I had to go to hospital and get my head sorted, split it open pretty bad, and ripped me a bald spot where my hair was. The creep got away with some cuts, a broken arm from where he was cuffed and tackled, and a fractured cheek. Turns out the guy was a convicted rapist and had prior convictions for breaking and entering. I hate to think what would have happened if I'd taken my sleeping tablets and been knocked out, or if my other window was opened. So, window creep, never fucking come to my window again, or next time, you will lose that arm. I couldn't sleep because this thing has been bothering me nonstop. I found the subreddit and thought I would share. I was visiting a new city over the last week, and after a 1,500-mile drive, I felt really worn down. I've been an on-and-off user of opiates for the last few years, and in a moment of weakness, the idea of procuring some popped into my head. I know how foolish this is, and I've continually beat myself up for it. I decided to post on Craigslist in hope of making a connection. I got a few responses, but they all fizzled out until one person emailed me. It was the first response that seemed legit, and he left a phone number for me to call so we could discuss things further. I call the number, and a very polite man answers. He gets down to business and tells me what he has. Everything sounds good, so we make plans to meet. He suggests a public place, goes in depth about how things will go, and sets a time. He gives me a description of what he looks like, and I tell him the same. I get off the phone to start heading that way when I think to Google the information he gave me about the place. Everything checks out. I start driving, and on my way there, I ended up accidentally getting off the freeway. While waiting at a light, I noticed there is a name attached to his email. I think surely it's a fake one. No one would use their real identity, and it sounds fake, like Joseph Jones or something. I start getting a nagging feeling about it, but continue driving. When I reach my destination, I decide to just Google the name. I see a few LinkedIn results and was about to close out the window when suddenly I see the word sex offender. I click on it and see a picture and rap sheet of this guy. He has been tried and convicted of drugging and raping 3 women. At almost that exact moment, I see the guy walk past my car and into the place we were supposed to meet. I immediately start my car and drive away as fast as I can. I spent the rest of the night crying because I almost jeopardized my life for something so stupid, and the thought that I was so close to evil made my skin crawl. The next day, I attended an NA meeting and have vowed to stay on track. Alright, thank you so much for watching. Once again, all these pictures were made by my friend Mr. Treese on DeviantArt, and I will have the link to their page in the description of this video. This picture here is just a picture of me. Thought it would be kind of cool to put in the background. It doesn't really make sense with all the other pictures I have, so I just put it in there. Anyway, I just wanted to quickly explain one thing I realized I never mentioned in any of my videos. The reason why I tend to talk really fast and I kind of blur everything together, I'm trying really hard to slow down. I have a really hard time with that for some reason. Like right now, I'm trying to talk slowly, and I just can't do it very well. I went to get dental surgery about a year ago, and it was a wisdom tooth to get out, and they were just way too rough with me, and I ended up getting a bunch of nerve damage in my mouth, so the whole bottom right of like my jaw, teeth, and tongue are all still totally numb from about a year ago, and so I've kind of had to relearn how to speak properly. So that is one of the reasons why I do sound a little bit strange. If anyone's even noticed, maybe they haven't, I'm just putting it out there, oh well. So I really appreciate it for just being nice to me, and yeah, I'm trying to slow down a little bit and be a little bit more articulate. Yeah, I'm just really trying not to blur everything together so much. So I'm going to keep making videos. I really like doing this, and I'm going to keep trying to make them a little bit better. So yeah, that's about it, and I should have a video up next Wednesday or Thursday. Please subscribe, like, and comment, and I will keep making videos. Thank you!